What you're about to see is a full-length sample tutorial from my new online course, Synthesis 101. In this program, you'll learn synthesizers inside and out, so you can make your own signature sounds and stop relying on presets. Also, as a huge thank you for watching my videos, I have a massive free giveaway for you guys. You can get this Ableton template complete with all the synth patches and samples by simply clicking the link below and downloading it from my site. Alright, so let's get jamming on this pad. We're going to use Ableton's subtractive synth, Analog. Analog comes with Ableton Suite, or you can get it as a paid add-on to Live. And it happens to be one of my favorites because it's a really fat, juicy sounding synth. Now we want our pad to be really thick, so we are going to activate both oscillators here. And I prefer square waves for pads because square waves have a lot of body to them, but they're also warm sounding, as opposed to sine waves, which tend to be a little bit too smooth, not enough body, and saw waves, which typically are a little bit harder and more abrasive. Now, I already have a MIDI clip in here that's programmed with a little chord progression, so I'm just going to go and knock the volume down. It tends to be pretty loud out of the box. I'm going to knock it down by minus 19 dB, and let's just give this a little preview. So pretty unimpressive at the beginning. We need to do a bit of work with this to get it to fill out and sound like a pad. First thing we're going to do is we'll take the detune parameters, and I'm going to detune one oscillator up by, let's say, 5 or 6 cents, and the other oscillator down by about the same. And this is going to spread them out and give us a bit of a thicker sound. Now we need to go over to the main section, and we're going to take the number of voices up to 20, just so we have enough juice when we get into playing multiple notes and doing unison voices and things like that. Now we'll sculpt the sound using the amp envelope. So we're going to click on the amp section for oscillator 1, and pads are characterized by a nice slow fade in and a long release. They're very smooth and orchestral feeling. So we're going to use the attack section of our envelope here, and we're going to take that out to 1 second. Now we're also going to go from exponential mode over to linear mode for the envelope, so it's going to be a nice smooth fade in. And then we're going to take the release and make it even longer, 1.5 seconds. Now we're using both oscillators, so we need to do this on both envelopes. So we're going to do the same thing here with our envelope for oscillator number 2. And then we get something that sounds a little like this. To add to the character and body of the pad, we're going to activate the noise section over here. We're going to bring it down. We don't need it full volume. We can bring it down quite a bit here to, say, negative 23 dB or so. And we're going to filter the color down to about 1K. So this is going to add in some nice noise to our pad. I'm going to turn this up so you can hear it more. And then blend it back down so it's not quite audible, but it's still adding to the sound. One of the key aspects of a good pad sound is that it changes over time. That's because pads are usually sustained, and they can get kind of boring if we don't evolve them to keep us interested. So let's use filters to morph the sound. We'll activate filter 1 and filter 2. And for this type of thing, I really like to use the notch filter. In this case, we're going to use the notch 2-pole filter. And that's because it cuts out just a little piece of audio while leaving the body of the sound intact. In our arrangement, the pad here is the main focal point, so it has a lot of room to breathe in the frequency spectrum. So we're going to leave it full-bodied. Filter 1, we're going to wind all the way down. We'll set it at around 150. Kick it up in the resonance a little bit. And then filter 2, we're going to leave maxed out at 22K. We're going to add a little resonance here as well. Here we go. So you can't really hear a massive difference in the sound because these notch filters are, like I said earlier, quite narrow. So the magic starts to happen when we move the notch filters. And we're going to do that by using the LFOs. We're going to use LFO1 and LFO2 here. And we're going to leave them, rather than syncing them to the host tempo, we're going to leave them unsynced on hertz, which means they're going to be more free-flowing and a little bit more random because we don't want things to sound super quantized here. We're going to reduce the rate so it sweeps very slowly through the pad. We use 0.3 hertz on one, maybe 0.2 hertz on the other. Now, in order for the LFOs to actually move the filter, we need to click back on the filter section, and here under frequency mod, we have an LFO parameter. So on the first one, we're going to take it all the way up to its max of 4, and on filter 2, we're going to take LFO 2 down to its minimum of -4. And that's going to sweep the filters nicely through the pad sound. A little something like this. I'd like the pad to sound even a little bit more lush, so we're going to use the unison parameter down here. We're going to use 4 unison voices, and we're going to take detune up to, let's say, 20. Let's check out how this sounds. Let's also try out some vibrato. I'm going to set the rate to 3 hertz, so pretty slow. And I'm going to take the amount all the way up to the top so you can really hear what it's doing. Then we'll back it off. Yeah, we'll leave it nice and subtle at around 15%. Now, I'm also going to use these 2 parameters, delay and attack, for the vibrato to contour how it comes in. So delay, I'm going to set to 500 milliseconds, and that's going to give us a little bit of a gap at the beginning before the vibrato even starts to come on. Then the attack phase, I'm going to set to 1 second, and that means it's going to slowly fade in over 1 second. So here's what that sounds like. At this point, I'm going to go back to the oscillators because we're using square waves, and square waves have a unique feature called pulse width. Pulse width will change the width of the square part of the waveform, and it creates really interesting effects if you modulate it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to set the pulse width for oscillator 1 to 100%, and I'm going to use the LFO 1 to modulate it in a negative direction. And I'm going to take oscillator 2, take the pulse width to 0, and have LFO2 modulate it in a positive direction. And because the LFOs are moving at different rates, we're going to get some interesting effects. So that rounds out our pad patch from the synth, but now we'll polish things off with some effects. The first thing I'm going to do is add in the reverb audio effect. We're going to use low cut and high cut. We'll leave the center frequency and the Q about where they are here. We're going to take stereo to 120% because we want it to be as wide as possible. And we're going to take up the decay time a bit to about 1.5 seconds. Let's check this out. Next in our chain, we're going to add a little bit of EQ with EQ8. I'm going to take the first EQ node and I'm going to put it in high pass mode and take all the low end out of our pad here. And that's because at the beginning of our track we have that big sub drop and we don't need any low end in the pad. I'm also going to take the mids and I'm going to scoop them around here. Maybe tighten up the Q a little bit. And yeah, about like that. That's because we have the drum beat in here and I want that mid-range of the drum beat to be able to occupy that area, so I'm going to knock the pad out of the way. One thing I like to do with pads is because they're such long, sustained elements in a tune, I like to give them some rhythm. And the way I like to do that is with an Autopan. And I've actually created my own preset. I just call it 1/4 pump. And it gives the pad a nice sidechaining feel by setting up the Autopan like this. Feel free to copy this exactly, but I've set the synced rate to be 1/4. I've put both sides completely in phase with each other, so it's basically a mono Autopan now. And I've bumped the shape to around 40%. And I'm taking the amount. Let's take the amount to, we don't need it 100% here. Let's maybe use about 65 or so. And it's going to give it a nice rhythmic quarter note pumping feel to it. Here's what it sounds like. And as a finishing touch, I'm actually going to use another Autopan, a fresh one. And we're going to use this to add a little bit more stereo imaging to it. So we're going to take this, we'll sync this one as well. Take it relatively slow, let's say around 1.5. And we'll take the amount up to about 60% or so. We'll adjust the phase so they're not quite in phase, but closer. It's going to give us nice differences between the left and the right channel. So that wraps up our pad in analog. Remember, you can get this patch and all the other patches included in this template for free by clicking the link below and downloading them from my site. And if you'd like more information on the synthesis and music production courses I offer, there's a link for that too. Thanks for watching.